and developing their business models. So we're running the session this evening, and as mentioned, it's co-ops building stronger communities. So the idea of the session tonight is really we're going to showcase 3 different organisations that have taken control of assets within their communities. We're going to hear from Marie, so thanks very much, Marie, for coming on the call from the Old Schoolhouse. And then we've got 2 other case studies that myself and Jo will present. We did want to have another guest from the organisation that I'm going to talk about, but unfortunately they were unable to attend. But I'm going to tell you all about them anyway, and hopefully do their story justice. So as mentioned, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. We'll take a pause for questions after we've presented each of the 3 organisations that we're going to talk to you about tonight. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass over to Jo and Marie to tell us all about the Old Schoolhouse.
I'm really pleased that Marie is with us this evening. I've worked with Marie over a number of years now, and she is what I would describe as a serial community co-operator. She's got a finger in many pies, and what she does is really inspirational. So I'm just going to ask Marie really to she's going to tell us a little bit about her co-op and sort of what it does. And I'm kind of going to hand over to her. I'm doing she's going to have to do the Professor Whitty next slide, please, due to the joys of technology. So do bear with us.
Yeah, thank you, Jo, and thank you for inviting me to come along this evening. It's lovely to be, so lovely. I can't tell you how great it is to be in a group of co-operators. I often feel quite isolated, even though Wolverton has a proud co-op history, which we're trying to resurrect through Future Wolverton. So it's really lovely to be in this group of people this evening. So I'm a director and also CEO of Future Wolverton, which is a community benefit society that was established in 2013. Jo, I don't know whether you can put the first slide up for me. That'd be lovely.
Can you not see the slides?
I can see number 1.
Oh, right, hang on. Right, okay.
That's the first.
The joys of technology. Right, there you go.
Lovely. Okay, so for those who don't know, Wolverton is a small railway town. It's in Milton Keynes, the new city of Milton Keynes, but it has a very distinctive identity. It was one of the existing communities that were taken into the new city in 1969 and became part of what is the new town of Milton Keynes. But we pride ourselves on having a very distinct identity and having a really strong sense of community. So the mission of Future Wolverton was set to be incredibly broad in order to allow us to do as many different things as we felt that we needed to do as an organisation. So you'll see there it's all about becoming a thriving and sustainable town, and there's mention of new business, housing and community facilities. And the project I'm going to talk to you about this evening is about our first assets called the Old School, which is in Old Wolverton, and it's been a journey which Jo has been part of since 2011. So I'll tell you the full extent of that journey shortly, but just a bit of information about Future Wolverton. So obviously we're a co-op, so we're owned and run by local people. I've lived in Wolverton for 25 years, unbelievably. All our board are local people, and all our staff also live locally, and we have over 200 members, including 115 shareholders of the Old School who invested in a community share offer, which Jo helped us make it happen, that share offer. So the next slide, Jo, if you can. So Future Wolverton came about as a result of a community visioning process that we did in the early 2000s, in 2003-04, and that visioning process engaged over 500 people in Wolverton, looking at what we wanted Wolverton to be like in 25 years time. And very strangely, we are coming up to that 25-year anniversary. That's just how long I've been involved in this. The feeling was that we came up with a very exciting, vibrant community vision called Future Wolverton, which then it was felt needed a community-based organisation to own and deliver that programme. And we began life actually as an unincorporated association, so just a club really. A load of people signed up because they believed in the delivery of the vision, and then that morphed into a company limited by guarantee about 5 years into the sort of whole delivery of the vision process. And very interestingly, the reason we established Future Wolverton as a co-op was that there was a sense that the company was acting, you know, it's sort of not in a very democratic way. Actually, there were concerns over accountability, and there was a feeling that that community were being sort of sidelined really, and what they believed in and what was in the original vision was sort of being taken over by one particular project and group. So I actually, during this period, was having a child. I have my son, and I remember standing outside our nursery, sort of taking my son Danny to nursery for one of the first sort of sessions when he was 3, and sort of being approached by somebody saying, Marie, we've got to sort this out, you know, it's all gone wrong, you know, the company's just not working, you know, we need to sort of get this sorted. And that really was the beginning of establishing Future Wolverton as a co-op. So there was a definite absolute need for local people to feel that it needed to be more democratic and community led, and really that's where our origins came from. So the next slide please, Jo. So originally the aims of the organisation were to be as entrepreneurial as possible. We do have a parish and town council. I have been a town councillor in my community in the past, but they were getting very bogged down in sort of local government and everything that comes with being a local authority. And there was this sense that there was this gap around entrepreneurial action and making things happen. And we set out to do originally 4 specific things: to deliver a major town centre regeneration scheme. We've got a building in Wolverton called the Agora Center, which actually had a co-op store within it until it was closed about 10 years ago. And that major regeneration scheme was one of the really principal things that came out of the vision process, that this building needed to disappear and be redeveloped. And I'm very proud and pleased to say that there is a planning application that's been approved, and that redevelopment of that scheme starts next year. So that's been a huge achievement of Future Wolverton and my community as a whole really. We also set out to support local business and to create local supply chains, and really to support one another's prosperity in the local economy, to work on community energy projects. And again, I'm really proud to say that that has morphed into a separate community energy organisation, another co-op called Wolverton Community Energy, which is doing great stuff, and also involved in the major regeneration scheme. And finally, we set out to acquire the old school and develop services from that building. So we had a very clear agenda around acquiring an asset, and the old school was the first one that we had our sights set on. So the next slide, Jo, please. These are our current aims. So we have ended up doing, you know, a whole diversity of work really over the last, you know, 10 years. And this is what we're currently working on. And this has come out of a re-engagement process with our members that we've been doing over the summer. So these are hot off the press, about to enter our new business plan as an organisation. So I thought it'd be worth showing the sort of transition from what we set out to do and what we are now involved in doing. So next slide, Jo. And this is the sort of extent of our work now, really. So we've got 3 streams of work. We work in 4 different areas: community development, work-based learning, community enterprise, and health and wellbeing work. And all of those programs have morphed out of the original sort of vision process and out of our engagement with our members. And our work-based learning is one of the key outcomes the Old School project, which I'll tell you more about now. Next slide, please. So we have a board who are elected, obviously, by our membership. I sit on the board in my role as CEO. We were very clear when we set the co-op up to make it as representative of local organisations as it could be. So we have seats around the table of our board for local organisations who are very important, and it was felt needed to be involved in on a sort of governance level within the organisation. We don't always get nominations from those organisations, but it's really important that they have a seat around the table. So this year we have a nomination from our town council and also from Wolverton Society, which is focused on heritage in the town. Next slide, please. And then our members, and these are pictures of our recent summer community engagement, member engagement process. So every year we try and reconnect with our membership. We do a variety. This year we did 4 different activities over the summer. We did walking and talking. We had a curry evening. We had an evening where we made witty stars for one of our events. So we try and get people out and about and re-engaging with us and talking to us about what the organisation does, what it could do, and what they think the priorities are going forward. And this work is now informing our new business plan and everything that we do, really. So next slide, please. So obviously I'm here to principally talk about acquiring the Old School. I just needed to give you a bit of background about Future Wolverton. So the Old School is our first asset. It's a Grade 2 listed building. It's in Old Wolverton, so it's in a more rural part of our area. It was derelict for many years, and we were first introduced to the building and asked to get involved in it in 2011. Next slide, please. So the building had a long lease on it from our local church, actually, which is directly opposite the building, and they made contact with us in 2011 and said, we really know this building needs to be rescued and brought back into community use. We can't look after it any longer. We've got our own crumbling Grade 1 listed building to look after, so we need some help, really. So we began a very long process which finally resulted in acquisition in 2017. So the first thing we did was we listed the asset as an asset of community value with our local authority in 2017. We then made a planning application to do what we felt was needed. The building has 3 separate businesses within it, which I'll explain further, and we needed to make sure that before we went ahead and purchased it, that we could actually do what we wanted to do with it, and because of the listing there were some restrictions. So we achieved planning permission in 2017. We purchased the building in 2017 with a very large lottery-based grant via Power to Change, and also with 2 loans, 2 social investment loans, one from the Architecture Heritage Fund and one from Co-op Foundation. The work began in 2018 and we finally opened in May 19. And overall, from beginning to end, the project, in order to take it from conception to opening, we raised, and it took over £1 million, so 1.2 million in total, 122,000 of which was a community share offer with our community and with the support of Co-ops UK. We were benefited from a booster grant where there was a match to any investment made locally by our community, which made a huge difference to our share offer. This is the first share offer that's ever happened in Milton Keynes, so it was amazing to actually make it happen and get local investors. Next slide, please. So we have 3 businesses operating in one building. We have a guest house, a 3-bedroom guest house, which is that beautiful little house you can see in the top photograph is our guest house. So we are on Airbnb and booking.com. We get booked out by families, by leisure guests, by people coming to weddings and other family events. And we also, pre-pandemic, actually more than now, had a lot of business traffic. A lot of people work in Milton Keynes but don't live here. So we had a lot of traffic related to that. It's a very successful part of our business. and a really important part of the underpinning of our financial position. We also run a cafe, which is open Monday to Friday and on a Saturday once a month. And we work with young people with learning difficulties and special educational needs who train in our cafe. We've also recently begun a programme supporting adults with autism, which I'll talk more about shortly. And we also have a hall. This is our beautiful hall, vaulted ceiling, where we have all the classic things that go on in a community centre, everything from yoga and Pilates and drama groups for children and the guides, through to pop-up restaurants on a Friday evening with various sort of local businesses. So it's a very vibrant space. Despite the pandemic closing us before we'd even had a first year of trading, we have actually been able to run a whole range of activities and events. So next slide, please. Those activities and events range from Forest School, and we've got a programme called Into Nature, which introduces children and young people to the environment, the local environment. We've got a scheme of nature borrowing boxes, which people can hire equipment that they might not be able to afford to buy, like bird binoculars and a telescope to look at the night sky, and a bug hunting kit. We've got table tennis that we are funding. We funded a programme during the summer to introduce young people to table tennis, and we're now funding a weekly class. We also get involved every year in Heritage Open Days and have a whole series of events and activities taking place. And as I mentioned previously, we have a programme called Making Tracks at the Old School, and this is focused on supporting adults with autism, ASD and mental health problems back into the workplace. And that is a programme funded by European Social Fund at the moment, and a whole range of local funders as well. The next slide, please. This is just some lovely photos to show you of our Forest School sessions. This is a small person in our community banging some lovely coloured pins into a watermelon, because we had a food themed Forest School session, and this is just activity in our grounds. So next slide, please. We have a whole range of events and activities going on. So this is a storytelling session that was held as part of Heritage Open Days called Stories Under the Stars, with our fire pit gleaming there in the foreground, and our withy lanterns made by our members hanging up in the yew trees. So it was a lovely activity. Next slide, please. We had our guest house open for people to come and have a look round. So we closed for the weekend, and we had some QR codes up and around the house explaining the history of the building. And we had lots of visitors and an art and craft activity going on in the living room of that space. Next slide, please. We had our now annual Hedgehog Day. So we are a big supporter of our local hedgehog rescue centre, Hedgehog Haven, and we have an annual Hedgehog Day which attracts so many people. We actually had to give the hedgehogs a bit of a respite. These are some of the rescued hedgehogs that Hedgehog Haven brought along, and it's a whole day of education and celebration of wildlife, and it's always really massively popular. We have our own resident hedgehogs on site, one of whom is named Brian. Some of you may know Brian Titley from Co-operative Assistance Network, and we have a hedgehog named in his honour, so he's always with us at all times. Can have been really important in also supporting us. And then finally, two photographic slides showing our work with students. So we work with two schools, Slated Row Special School. These are some of the students in Slated Row serving in the cafe. And then our final slide is our Making Tracks programme. So this is a really special programme that has been really impactful, and it came about as a result of the pandemic, really. Our students were not with us anymore. What I felt a real need and desire to make sure the building was being used and also looked after whilst we were semi-shut, really. And so we identified a need within our local community for a programme supporting very socially isolated autistic adults. We've got what happens is they come and work, they come and do work placements for 12 weeks at the old school, and they do work that's needed within the project. So in the middle there is a picture of Liam and Clive, our site manager, clearing the gutters, and the top photograph is a trainee, Abby, and our work placement coach, Ian, making bird boxes and bat boxes. Bottom slide is our community artist that we work with, helping one of our trainees, Kay, to develop some cards which we now sell in our shop. And then there's Liam trying to treat Clive in that photograph. So all our trainees get an opportunity to do a range of courses, including a first aid course. So from very, very small beginnings where Jo was present, we have now become a provider of services. We're being funded to deliver education and learning programs, and it's all happened because we're a co-op, and that's the amazing power of cooperation, I think. So yeah, hope I haven't said too much, but said enough at the same time.
Thank you, Marie. That was brilliant. And what I think is Marie has sort of underestimated or under explained actually the state of the building when they took it on. I went once, and it was, to all intents and purposes, derelict. So to look at it now with its lovely shiny floors and vaulted ceilings warms the cockles of my heart. So you know, and it was something that was sat in the community that was unused, and so I think sort of the change you've managed to bring through using that has just been phenomenal.
And also a dearly loved asset, so an asset that people had been to, you know, we've got 90-year-olds in our community who had attended brownies there, you know, and they had a range at that point in that hall, and they toasted marshmallows around that range. You know, this is a place where people important moments happen in people's lives, like, you know, I'm not getting married at that point, although we are actually a licensed wedding venue, so people can get married with us now. But, you know, important events, important community events, and it had been a derelict really for, you know, when we got introduced to the project for about 10 years, just purely because of the state of the building. It had been shut to community use. So yeah, the best moment of all of my moments in the whole journey of the old school was showing the Friday Club around the building when it was completed. So they're a group of older residents in our community that meet socially. They now meet once a month in the building. They'd used the building historically. They were devastated when it was shut, and they'd been meeting in one another's living rooms for about 5 or 6 years, but everyone's living room was not big enough in order to accommodate the group. So the return of the Friday Club, I have to say, was one of a real emotional moment for me. And we got a cake welcoming them back, and we had champagne out of a very dodgy set of glasses that were currently in the kitchen at that point, some of which we'd inherited from them, I think, originally. So before we'd even got fully operational. So that was a really special moment, and one that I won't forget for a long time.
Thank you. I think there are a couple of questions from Krista, I think both of them actually. How many members in the Wolverton Co-op? You did touch on that earlier, didn't you?
So we've got just over 200 members. I think it's about 208 members, which is relatively small, I guess. But our community is, the core area of Wolverton is probably about 3,000 homes. So actually, I don't know how to work that out, but it's not bad in terms of a membership. 115 of those members are people who became members when we did our share offer, and there are people from across the UK. So we've got shareholders as far as the Highlands of Scotland and, you know, Cornwall, who invested in the share offer because of the work we were going to do with young people, and work-related learning, and bringing, ensuring that the asset was used for that purpose. So, you know, we're very connected with our membership. A lot of the people who wanted to see the building come back into use and lived very locally to it ended up investing in the share offer. So whole families invested, you know, mum, dad, their grown-up kids, and the grandchildren. So we're really proud of our very local members. So I think it's a 60-40 split. So 60% of our membership has an MK12 postcode and 40% doesn't.
Thank you. I appreciate this is probably one you don't want to go into too much detail on. I think there's probably a yes answer to the second bit, but Christopher's saying, what is the debt situation? Do you have to achieve some version of profitability?
That's a really good question. So the debt situation, I'm fine to share the debt situation. So we have a long loan with the Architectural Heritage Fund, which is about 120,000, and we have a loan with the Co-op Foundation of 50,000. And so we do the business has to be commercially successful. So we are on paused loan repayments with AHF because of the pandemic and the impact on the business. We are not on pause with Co-op Foundation. So we began repaying the Co-op Foundation loan about 6 months ago. So it's tough. I mean, it is really tough. We're servicing, you know, quite a lot of debt at the same time as trying to establish a business. You know, I have been on the biggest single learning curve I have ever been on in my life, I think, by bringing this building back into use. And I think Joe will probably remember that, you know, at the time at which all I could focus on was actually getting the money to bring the building back into use. And it was a constant sort of funding round to try and get more money, and we found more and more problems with building, including a bloody well, sorry, excuse my language, including a well full of water at one point underneath a pile of rubble. So so yeah, it really tested me. And to be honest, at the point where the building was finally done, I have to say I'd probably given very little thought to how we were going to run it and how we were going to make it work. Which may sound horrifying to you all, and probably is, but actually it's probably the reality for a lot of community-based organisation. You're so focused on that end game that you don't think about what the next end game is, and maybe I should have, but actually I'm not sure I even had the capacity or the headspace to do so at that point. But it has been a huge journey that we've been on, and obviously COVID in the middle of, you know, having the COVID pandemic after less than a year of operation, in a very bizarre way, provided a bit of a pause and a bit of a reset. And actually, although it was devastating financially, we were successful in getting quite a lot of financial support and to see us through. And actually, just the space and time to rethink things was amazing. Not that I'm recommending a global pandemic to do that, of course. It's a bit of a radical way to have a bit of a pause, but we have restructured and rejigged the business. So we originally were not running the cafe ourselves. It was being run by the school, and it wasn't really working. They didn't really want to run a cafe. They wanted to deliver education through the cafe. So we've now taken over running the cafe directly, and that was essential because we had a part of the building that wasn't generating an income for us. So that's been a really crucial change to our strategy, and other big changes were made as well to the staff team and to everything really. So yeah, strange what a global pandemic does for you, isn't it?
Okay, that's brilliant, Marie. Thank you so much. Ed, I see you've asked the question about raising capital, and obviously Marie's already touched on sort of the grants and the loans and touched on community shares. I think the two case studies that Kathy and I are going to talk about perhaps might add some more to that as well, just to give Marie a break, really. Marie, I can't thank you enough for all of that, and applaud you for all the work that you've done. It is phenomenal, and I think you're brilliant, and I want a hedgehog named after me, please.
Yeah, no, you know, there's an actual Brian Hedgehog toy now, Joe. So you can have your own one if you want one.
No, thank you. That's a very kind offer.
Send one over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Kathy, who's going to tell us some more about another sort of project where they've worked in the community.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to work out how to share some slides. Bear with me. Can everybody see those slides? Brilliant. So I'm going to talk to you about Flows, the place in the park, which is in Oxford. And actually, listening to Marie speak, there are a lot of similarities between the two organisations and the two community spaces that they've created. Just to give you a little bit of background, the asset that the organisation now run was previously a children's centre, and it's located within Florence Park, which is in Cowley in Oxford. And that children's centre was at that time owned by the City Council, owned and run by the City Council. And they announced in 2016 that they were going to close the centre completely due to budget cuts. So the local community recognised that this children's centre was really important. It was a really important asset, and they really wanted to be able to keep it open and keep it available for their community. So a number of local groups came together, and they were led at that point by a community interest company called Nature Effect. And they pledged their support for keeping the building open for community use within that neighbourhood. So there's a list there of some of the organisations that lent their support to that. So local schools, Good Food Oxford, a local city farm. And Nature Effect pulled all this together and actually submitted a bid to Oxford Council to run the building, which was actually rejected at that time. The council felt that they weren't experienced enough and the plan wasn't robust enough. So they got declined at that point. So then moving on to the following year, in March 2017, the local council published this paper called Oxfordshire Together, Giving Communities Control Over Local Services. But ironically, in the same month, they did actually close that centre, that children's centre, down. So having rejected a community bid to run the building and publishing a report that said that they had aspired to do all of the right sort of things, the centre actually closed, unfortunately. So that was back in 2017. And then the local community started campaigning straight away, because they didn't want to lose this asset. So they got the press involved. They talked to the press about the importance of it for their local community, all the different groups that had previously used the centre, and a number of new groups that would use the centre should it remain open, came together. They petitioned the council. They went back in with new bids. That community interest company that I mentioned went back in with new bids to the council and tried to negotiate with them in order to save that building. So the community really all came together at that point to work together and try and save what they recognised was a really valuable asset. So then that campaigning worked to a degree, and the council actually agreed to give a grant to Aspire, which was a separate charity, but Aspire agreed to work with Nature Effect, and in doing that brought their track record. They were an organisation that was known to the council, so the council felt more confident in giving a grant to them and giving them the opportunity to develop a business plan for the building. So Aspire and Nature Effect and all the other community organisations worked together to create a new charitable community benefit society, and the trading name of that is People, Place and Participation, but locally it's just known as Flows, the place in the park. So that Community Benefit Society was formed, and then they successfully took over the running of the centre and reopened it in September 2018. So after that initial support that they got from Aspire and being incubated by them, they took complete ownership and opened the centre themselves. So that was September 2018, and Flows are still running it to this date. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the kind of activities that go on at Flows. And this is where there's a lot of crossover with the schoolhouse, showing the sort of breadth of community activities that can happen in these sort of buildings once the community gets ownership of it. So first and foremost, it's a community space. It's free to go in and use the space. Anyone in the local area can go and sit in there. It's got a lending library and a book swap. They also are currently a social enterprise incubator. So there are spaces for other organisations to work within that building, and they're supporting two startup social enterprises within the building as well. Then they've got the cafe, which is a really important part of any sort of community space. People need to be fed and watered, so they've got a cafe. And similarly, again, the cafe was initially run by an external organisation that they leased the cafe space to. Last year, they actually took that back within their operations, and they run the cafe themselves. They also launched, this was just pre-pandemic, they decided to launch their refill shop, which is, as you can see the picture there, it's a zero plastic shop. So you bring in your containers and you buy cereals and flour and sugar and whatever else you might need. And yeah, that was launched pre-pandemic, and despite the pandemic obviously having an effect on the community centre, they did actually manage to keep this shop open throughout to supply people with food in the local area, and they actually grew that part of the business throughout the pandemic as well. So really shows how resilient they were there. Some other things that happen in the building: they've got a nursery, so a nature-based nursery for 2 to 4 year olds. There's some pictures there of little people getting close to nature. Something else that they run in the building is the community midwives. So these community midwives work with expectant mothers in the ward, and they operate out of the centre, so they're permanently based in that centre. They've got rooms to hire, so I mentioned that social enterprise incubator space. There's also meeting rooms and conference spaces that any other organisations can rent out, that are available to use in the centre as well. And they run a number of courses based around crafts, based around horticulture, education. So there's a big offering for lots of training there for the local community. And then run events as well. So that picture on the side there is just a flyer for one of their events called Story Explorers. And the other event they've got live at the moment is Nature Creators, so primarily based around education and children and parents coming to these things with their kids. So a whole range of events that they run throughout the year as well. So that's giving you a sort of a quick overview of Flows and the amazing centre that they run, and the battle that they had to go through in order to get ownership of that building. Just to go back and touch a little bit on the legal structure that they chose. And Marie did sort of mention this as well in terms of the schoolhouse. So they formed a charitable community benefit society, and a CBS exists for the benefit of the wider community. So they saw the potential that this community space could have on the far-reaching community. Such a society is governed by its members, so anyone in the community can join as a member. And again, as mentioned in the previous case study, that meant that they were able to raise money through community shares. They actually successfully raised £50,000 when they formed their community benefit society, in order to be able to reopen that building. And then with being a charitable community benefit society, that also means that they operate for charitable purposes within their community, and means that they may be eligible for certain grant funding and other support. So really, it demonstrates that this structure is a really important structure that organisations can use in order to build stronger communities, in order to really engage with people in the wider community, to be able to raise finance through that method, and to really allow people to become members and have a say in the running of the organisation as well. So on that note, I believe that's the end of my slideshow. So if I just get rid of that, bring you all back again. So that's Flows. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we did want to have somebody from Flows here. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it. But if anybody does have any questions, then I will try and field them as best as I possibly can. I see there's one question in the chat so far about how many people can be accommodated in the conference space from Tara. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but it's reasonably small. I think we're talking about sort of 30 to 50 people rather than hundreds.
Thanks, Kathy. That's useful. We're always looking for spaces that we can potentially use for all sorts of things. And clearly going into 2022, we'll be looking at, from a Mid-Counties point of view, at some more face-to-face activities. So it's great to know that that's available in Oxford, which we struggle to find suitable sort of venues in Oxford. Has it got any parking, Kathy?
Yes, it has. It's got a car park, yeah.
It's gold dust. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for that.
Okay. There's another question from Christopher about income. So the organisation rents the building, so the council still actually owns the building, so the CBS rents the building from them, and they do get some rental income from the nursery, from the midwives, from booking the conference space, from people booking it to hold events there, and then they make money themselves from the cafe operations. So I hope that answers your question, Christopher. And then we have a question from Ed about converting a CBS to a charitable CBS. I think Jo's probably best placed to answer this. I'm going to refer to her with her expert knowledge.
Thanks, Kathy. I thought that one might be coming my way. I don't want to get too technical on this, so it might be easier to take it offline. But the answer is yes, it can be, and no, it can't be. It depends on whether you've got a statutory asset block in your existing rules. So I'm happy to pick that one up offline rather than disappear down the rabbit holes that are cooperative legal structures, if that's okay with you, Ed.
Just going to go back to some more questions that have come in from Christopher. So how long have you been running with an active membership? So the membership, they started taking on members as soon as they opened. So that's back in 2018. So that's when members were able to join. And I believe they did have face-to-face AGMs pre-pandemic. But I think they've probably been online for the last year or last couple of AGMs. In terms of the number of volunteers, I'm afraid I don't know that information. In terms of employed staff, I believe they have a staff base of around 10 people. So it's not a huge operation, but there's, you know, it's reasonable. Yeah, sorry, I just don't have the answer to the volunteer question. And I think, unless I've missed any, that's all of the questions in the chat. Unless anybody's got anything else that they want to ask me at this point. Christopher just come back with a comment. The interesting point is keeping motivation going. Yes, I think you find that with any sort of organisation that has volunteers as well. It is it's important to keep those volunteers and members engaged. And I think flows do that by having a really wide offer of activities and things that people can get involved with in the centre. So I'm going to pass back to Jo to do a case study of another organisation. Jo.
Thank you for that. One final presentation for you all. I'm aware the evening is ticking on and we're all getting hungry. This is one that is in process, I would say. It's work in process. They are in the unfortunate position that Marie was several years ago, of Jo going through their business plan with a fine-tooth comb going, do you really mean that? So this is a sort of pre-taking it on, but I think what it really shows is, I mean, we're talking about building communities tonight, and this is another demonstration, I think, of how we can see co-ops building their communities. This one is the Ultimate Picture Palace, which is off the Cowley Road in Oxford, and it's an independent cinema. And I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the history, just because I think it shows that this has been an asset that's been in the community for sort of a while, and why there's the passion that sits behind it. So it was actually built in 1911. It was Oxford's first purpose-built cinema, and it used to show short comedies, serials, melodramas, news, all those sorts of things. But it closed in 1917 because the then manager was conscripted and went off to war, and there was nobody left to run it. And so it sat idle for a fair few decades, but in 1974 a couple of the university alumni came across it. It was being used to store furniture in, and they reopened it as the Penultimate Picture Palace, but due to managerial differences, and they closed themselves down in 1994, and Cinema Paradiso was their last film that they showed at that point. But if there's a film, the video about the history of it, and people like Ian Hislop are in it because they remember the Ultimate Picture Palace from their day of university. In 1994, squatters moved in, and it was renamed the Section 6 Cinema, and it became a real hub for culture and politics in East Oxford. It would put on free screenings, live music, community events. But as you can see, the building is beautiful, and so in September 1994, it was actually awarded Grade 2 listed status. So you can see, even in those days, there was a lot of community activity happening around the building. In 1997, it was reopened by the Mahan brothers, and they carried on that tradition of alternative screenings of films that perhaps weren't seen anywhere else, and continued to engage with the community. In 2011, it was bought by Becky Hallsmith, what she described as an impulse purchase, as you do. I popped out one day and I came home with the cinema. Sadly, Becky passed away in 2018, but she'd spent those 7 years really building up a community that sat around the cinema itself. And sort of when she died, she asked that Friends of the Cinema would work towards turning it into a community-owned business. And so in 2018, there was a small group of residents who came together and went out and said to the local residents, local community, do you want us to do this? Is there support for the idea of retaining this building as a cinema in a way that it had always been, that offers something to the community that it hasn't, that you don't normally get somewhere else? So in early 2019, they set themselves up as a community cooperative. And the estate of Becky gave them preferred bidder status because they could see that there was a real passion in the community for this to be retained within the community, for it not to be sold to Odeon or anybody else, that the business needed to be kept. There was a new manager was brought in who started to really turn the business around again and build it up into something that was really thriving. And we'd been working together, we'd written a business plan, we'd done all the finances, we were ready to put out our proposal to the local community to see if they would invest in buying the business. And we were all ready to launch in May 2020. And then, do you know what happened? Yes, along it came. John is coughing just to show us what came along at that point. When we went into lockdown, obviously cinemas were one of the first services to be closed. That sort of getting everybody in a room together was shut. Thankfully, the Ultimate Picture Palace received support from the government and through the Arts Council. It ran, again, which demonstrates it really support from the communities. It ran a crowdfunding appeal to keep it going during COVID, and they'd set themselves a target and they achieved it within 24 hours. So you can see how the community is really behind this this cinema. And it finally was, after a few false starts, as we all know with COVID, it finally reopened properly again in May 2021. As you can see, this is a quick screenshot of their listings for this week. They are still offering alternative options. They do get second screenings. So at some point, James Bond will be appearing in the Ultimate Picture Palace on the Cowley Road in Oxford. So do feel free to book a ticket. But as you can see, they offer a wide range of films to local people. So you would have thought that 2 years down the line, my wonderful group of people had gone, I can't take this anymore. This is madness. It's too much to cope with. But oh no, they are a tenacious bunch. And the community although we were absolutely ready to go before COVID, there have been a number of hiccups since then. Firstly, the business has had to be revalued. We've been through a process where actually the value of a cinema business at one point in COVID went through the floor. It was, you know, we can't open, we can't bring any income in. So the business was revalued. Then it reopened and it seems to be doing very well. So it was revalued again. So there's been some negotiation around price, but I think, touch wood, we have now finally agreed on a price with the executors of the will. And unbeknownst to them, the building was sold from underneath them by the landlords to one of the colleges in Oxford University. So they were in the process of renegotiating a lease, and the college came back to them with a new lease that was considerably shorter than the one that they'd originally been working to. Originally, they'd been offered a 25-year lease. I think they were offered a 5-year lease first time, and we have managed to negotiate that back up. But as you can see, this poor group of people who first of all thought they were all ready to go and it would all have been signed, sealed and delivered, and then we have a pandemic, and then these other things follow on behind. However, the business plan, the finances, the proposal, they're all being reviewed as we speak, and they hope that they will go for their community buyout that will happen before the end of the year. So, you know, Marie's talked about how, you know, at that point, there was a point where it was all focused on what she was on, that whole buying of it. And, you know, Marie had many sleepless nights, I know. But equally, this group has really stuck with it. And I think for me, where we see the cooperative model really building those communities is it's enabled people to get behind these projects, to really offer something that maybe other models don't. And what's happened is that the community have stuck with it because the community can see that they will continue to own these businesses and have that sort of support from within the community. So that one really is a quick rattle through what's happening with the Picture Palace. The building is beautiful, I think, as you saw on the first slide. that's really all I've got to say, I think, on that one. So I hope that was a real rattle through on that one. So Christopher has asked, how long is the lease? As I say, it's not yet signed, sealed and delivered, but I think it's about 15 years at the moment. And the share offer hasn't happened yet. No, we're looking probably in the end of this year for there to be the share offer launch. So that one, as I say, is still work in progress, but they're certainly looking to develop their offer once the business has been built, brought. They're looking that they're going to expand their offer. It's a very multicultural part of Oxford along the Cowley Road, and they recognise that actually they could really widen their offer for the local global communities. And they want to do some work with deaf and disabled communities as well, and how they might bring the audiences in from there, and how they also take going to the cinema back to being a family event, rather than sitting in a very cold Odeon, wondering why are we here. So as I say, a fantastic group of people to work with, and despite everything, still going. So that's a very quick rattle through on that one. Christopher's similarities with the Charlton Co-op cluster near Manchester, wanting to buy an old Co-op funeral building. That's, yeah. It was interesting, as we've been doing the research for this, we came across an article that sort of talked about the early days of Co-op cinemas and how they were seen as a real threat to original cinema chains. And this was in, I can't remember when now, but it was quite interesting to see how we were almost coming full circle on that. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts or anything they want to say?
I think, Jo, for me, I'd just like to say, tonight the 3 case studies have been a great example and lesson in the art of what's possible for communities. And I think that's something that we as co-operators and as mid-counties working with Co-op Futures need to really get out there as a message. What you talk about tonight is solutions to local problems in a cooperative way. I'm sure Marie, like others, had many sleepless nights, but actually the legacy of what they've done in their community will be there forever. And that will be recognised as the power of the people in that area taking control of the destiny of their facilities and their amenities. And I think the cinema one is another great example of that, and clearly Flo's place as well as. So I just wonder how we get that message out there much wider to people. I think Co-op Futures is the best kept secret probably out there to lots of local communities, the same way as some of these case studies. Who'd have known about Flo's place, who'd have known about the cinema that you talk about, it is about how we can help you to excuse me, that's Tinkerbell that's just arrived home from work as my ring doorbell goes off. So how can we enable the message to get wider to ensure people really do know about the opportunities that are available to them?
It's a very good question, Tara. I'm just going to bring Helen in because I think she wants to come in, and then maybe we'll pick all of these up together.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks for all of you for the brilliant presentations. Mine's very similar to Tara's, really, which is just trying to understand whether in each of these projects the co-op bit was already there, in the sense of, was there somebody at the centre of it and knew about co-ops, or if not, how did they make the connection?
Marie, I'm gonna ask you first.
Yeah, it was a very opportune meeting actually for me with Jane Gwindy, who used to work for Co-op Futures, who was doing some work in Milton Keynes with another group, and basically we had this situation where the predecessor organisation wasn't working, and you know, we needed to sort out that sort of anti-democratic feel about the company. And I just happened to meet Jane, who happened to be receiving some funding, I think, from the Plunkett Foundation. Joe, you'll correct me if I'm wrong about that, to do some work, you know, in our area. And you know, I knew about co-ops. I didn't really know about community benefit societies. So, you know, but everything that was said to me was like, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. You know, when you have a conversation and somebody's giving you the highlights, and you're thinking, oh yeah, this will work. And you know, in our community, you know, the co-op store used to own everything in Wolverton. Every shop used to be a co-op. You know, we had a travel agent, a supermarket, a funeral director. You know, Wolverton has this industrial and Providence society sort of background, so it just felt like, you know, like Joe was just saying about the picture palace, it felt like we were coming back to a structure that had been forgotten, but was actually really relevant to the current moment at that time when the decision was made. So yeah, I think, you know, I think it is about people knowing and understanding that it's an option, and getting it. You know, our experience is that everyone has a raft of cards in their pocket, in their wallet, or on their key fob. They've got key fobs for everything from Tesco to whatever, but they don't understand what a membership organisation is, and they don't really get it. And you know, I think the co-op movement needs to do more to celebrate what's great, really, so that people do understand it more and do see it to be relevant to their lives and their community.
Thank you.
I know that it's about resources. I know people do a lot, but you know what I mean. We haven't got the resources of Facebook, have we, behind us? But wouldn't it be brilliant if we did?
And I mean, alongside that is those fortuitous conversations. I know with the Picture Palace, they happened to know somebody who'd been involved in a local community pub buyout. And I've always said co-ops beget co-ops, because actually once you've worked with a group who are a co-op, and they go out and talk to other people, and other people go, oh yes, that's what we need. And so where you start to see co-ops talk to other co-ops, it's quite interesting. And I think, how do we do this? I mean, I think one of the things, were we to put you all on the spot this evening, is we might have said to you, well, you know, what's something you think your community could be running that adds that sort of benefit? Is there something in your community? Is it the pub? Is it the shop? Is it the cinema? Is it the pier? I've done some work with a pier. You know, actually there are all sorts of things out there, but it requires the people who are going to engage with it to be involved. And I think that's often one of the challenges, is I can come along and say, oh, that would make a lovely co-op, but actually the people, what really needs to happen is the members to take control of that, or the potential members to take control of that. So it's not an easy one. I think I've talked round the answer there. Does anybody else? I see there's some sort of stuff in the chat around teaching and training about these co-op technicalities. Happy to host the platform. Co-operatives cooperating together is one of the 7 principles. It's there. I'm not sure, has anybody got any other questions or comments or thoughts on sort of what we've talked about today?
Joe, maybe, you know, these sessions are always quite inspiring. I start making a list of things that should be done, things that could be done, but maybe one of the things is that we look outside of co-operators and into communities to start that potential solution conversation. And maybe, you know, there's lots of, I'm just thinking, you know, that, you know, we're in contact, certainly mid counties and through my role, we're in contact of local authority officers and community officers and whatever. They're actually close on the ground to where they identify that there are these problems, and maybe they're the people that we should be targeting to say there is a solution that you might want to propose to that community, and then that's almost a brokering service. So maybe there's something we can do that sort of outside of what we've talked previously, to really start to think about how do we get the message to the non-cooperators about cooperation.
Yeah, and I think that's those intermediaries can play a really useful role, but quite often they don't know that the option is there, and so the go-to answers are, well, be a charity, or be a community interest company, or, you know, so there are, and we seem to have dropped down the list of what the options are. So I think, you know, to be able to influence those intermediaries who are directly involved with their communities is a real opportunity for us. John, I think you wanted to come in, and then Helen wants to say.
Well, it's a similar theme. It's on the same thing, because it's something we do get quite upset about, that co-ops, we've got some fantastic co-ops, some fantastic examples of co-ops, and no one knows about them and that kind of thing. I think what's really good about the 3 examples today is they've all got wonderful stories, and I do know that stories work with people. I can't help relating to fair trade and how fair trade is very popular and is fairly well known. Certainly, I would argue probably better known than say co-ops in general. And I wonder if we could try to take a leaf out of their book in actually promoting those stories, using the stories, and there is the fantastic resilience. I mean, the things that have hit that. I mean, so I got cut off, by the way, sorry, so I missed about 5 minutes or so, but I could pick up the rest of it. The amazing resilience of the cinema, and I suppose it's just how we can get those stories out to exactly the people outside the movement, Tara, that you're talking about. We can use our shops, our shops and businesses, obviously in the respect of the counties, but perhaps other societies as well, and just keep pushing it, because they are amazing stories. And using other vehicles, imaginative things. I understand you've got a lot of young people on your new. I always forget the name of your member committees. Sorry. Whatever
On the MEC. Yeah,
MEC, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Charge them with the responsibility of getting the message out. There you go.
Well, actually, John, without actually being conferring the script beforehand, that is one of the objectives of the Young Co-operators, is how we promote cooperation as a business model and get more people to understand that. So was there straight back at you. We're already there, and we're going to be doing it.
Thank you. We'll leave the banter now. Okay, Helen, you've got to want to come in.
It's just really, again, on that subject, because Rose Marley from Co-ops UK came to our board meeting on Monday, and that was one of the things that Rose was talking about, was really about, you know, sort of getting more co-ops, and we're looking at the numbers of co-ops, and the one, you know, one of the things that she was talking about is how, without watering it down, how do we make it simple? And I know that's something that Joe, I think that you do very well in terms of leading people down that path. But, you know, and I think it's becoming a clear focus for Co-ops UK as well. So I think that will be something that we, as a movement, we will see some progress towards. But, you know, these are getting behind these the local groups and really trying to drive it from the community upwards. I think is absolutely essential. So, if we can perhaps, I know it's great to get our young members doing it, but maybe it's something at our AGM or something that would be really good and really well, because we have such a wide range of people who attend, to be able to talk to them about some of the examples. And maybe your idea, Joe, about asking us to come up with an idea in our community, if we could task our members at the AGM to do the very same thing.
Thank you, Helen. Our challenge is always, how do we get the message out there? And I think, I think John is right. Stories are really strong, and I think Marie, what Future Wolverton has done is phenomenal, and to see how they've brought all those parts of the community together into that building in an area where there wasn't a community space really demonstrates how they've kind of brought the resilience, I think, of the community together. I love Marie, by the way. I'd take her home, but she'd exhaust me.
Yeah.
Bless you. But
Yeah,
but
no,
also, Joe, I think that what we've learned is actually engaging people online. Everybody tonight has given an hour and a half of their life, to talk around, to learn more and talk around this subject. And what we're finding is that more people are doing that. More people are prepared to do this than they are to give up a day to come to a conference or come to an event or whatever else. So I do think sort of the online connection might be a way in which we really do sort of drive. I'm not for 1 minute saying that it would replace a face-to-face conversation with somebody over a cup of tea at some place, but we're definitely reaching more people through this platform than we have ever before, in quite diverse communities. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we want to be pushing. Okay, so I'm just picking up, are there any more questions for Joe? Anything else that you want to add, Joe? I'm conscious of the time.
No, only if anybody has got an idea, do please get in touch. I think I put my email in the chat earlier, or Kathy is also available, although she's keeping her head down while we're having this conversation. But Kathy is always around. She's much more focused on the West Midlands, so certainly for sort of that patch, do get in touch. And what we hope, I suppose, from this evening is that it sparked some ideas, that people are now looking. What we want people to do is to see the things in their community and say, how can we turn this into an asset that builds and strengthens our communities? And we hope we've shown sort of a couple of examples of how that can work this evening, and so that you're all going to go away and go, we'll have one of them. So that's it really. Great. From us, unless Kathy or Marie have got anything that they want to chip in at this point.
No, just thank you very much for having me and for organising it. And it's lovely to be in a cooperative environment briefly for an hour and a half, rather than that nasty big wild world that's out there at the moment. So thank you.
Just to say, I've put my email address in the chat now as well, so if anyone wants to contact me, I would be delighted.
Thank you very much both, and again, thank you for giving up your evening and supporting. Just wanted to, a couple of things for me. It would be wrong of me at this point, with such committed co-operators and valued guests on the call, not to do a bit of a shout out here for a couple of things. So one is, we really want these conversations to be a feature in everybody's diary. Please check the website. There are 2 more Co-op Futures co-op conversations before Christmas, one on the 17th of November, which is around about working for a business that you own, that Joe's hosting again, and the second is on the 15th of December, and it's about starting your own co-op, and that's something we're really going to push with our charity partners, our community partners, but also our young people as well as. These are now the best kept secrets, as is Co-op Futures. So I would urge you, rather than us talking to the converted sometimes, and people on this call don't need to be reminded what a fantastic cooperative solution can actually achieve.